Thank you so much, India. First up on our panel this evening is Professor Ensher. She's an expert in mentorship. Coincidentally, has a book called Power of Mentoring, How Mentors and Proteges Get the Most Out of Their Relationships. Next, we have Kashani. She's known as the Godmother of Silicon Beach and has founded the first co-working space in LA called COACCEL. It was home to Uber LA, Instacart, Fullscreen, and many of LA's first successful startups. She's also an LMU grad and launched COACCEL, the Human Accelerator. Well, Lara Sweet, it's like Sarah with an L. Lara Sweet is the Chief Accounting Officer at Snap Inc. Lara is responsible for leading the global accounting, financial reporting, shared service, and financial operation processes. At Snap Inc., she co-pioneered the Women's Mentoring Program, which currently has paired more than 300 global participants from every level in the company. And last but certainly not least,
I'll take honors on this last one because Rachel Payne is a personal mentor of my own, and I'm so happy to see her here on this panel tonight. Rachel Payne is the founder and CEO of Fem Inc., a holding company whose mission is to serve and empower diverse audiences. In her prior role as principal of Global Strategic Alliance at Google, she worked with top executives across the company to develop comprehensive strategies for their largest global partners. She also has extensive experience as a woman entrepreneur raising capital in both Silicon Beach and Silicon Valley. Let's please give a hand for all of our panelists this evening.
let's start off with Professor Ensher. I know many of your students are here tonight. But my first question that I'd like to know, not only are you an amazing professor at LMU, but you're also a leading expert in mentorship and have been featured on Wall Street Journal, New York Times, Fast Company, and more media outlets. For those in the audience who are looking for mentors, can you please tell us the best way to get a mentor?
Sure. All right, testing. This actually happened to me in my TEDx talk. It doesn't feel like it's working.
Where's my
testing, 1, 2, 3, testing.
Oh.
Feels like it's working now. Yes?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect.
All right, Professor Ensher.
So I think starting off with the $64 million question is why. So how do you get a mentor? So I'm going to give you the 3-minute spiel of how to get a mentor, and there's lots more to it. And so if you want to know more, there is a 15-minute spiel of a TEDx talk on my website, as well as some blogs, posts that you can read about. And if you really want to go deep, then you can watch some LinkedIn learning classes. And for the LMU students, those are all free to you because we have a subscription. Everybody else, you could do it for a month and then turn it off if you want. So how to get a mentor? We are part of the Jesuit tradition, and so we are all about reflection. So think of this as 4 R's. So you start with reflecting about what it is that you want. What are your goals? What are your strengths? And what are your weaknesses that you actually care about improving? Because we all have weaknesses, but some things we just really don't care if we ever improve. So strengths, weaknesses, goals. Who am I? What do I want? Okay, so that's the first R. Secondly, you want to do some research. So you want to think about who are the go-to people in your particular field or organization or profession. So when you think about it, any profession has people who stand out, right? They are kind of the rock stars of the profession. So it's always good to start with who are those? And even if you can't get to them, a lot of times they belong to a lineage of mentors. So you start trying to get to them, and then sometimes they can refer you to people that they know. And so how do you do that, right? It's like, well, of course, we all want to connect with the rock stars. The best way to do it is actually looking around the room. So certainly coming to events like this, but really I love to use LinkedIn and have people find alumni connections. Start with an informational interview. So it's kind of like dating, you don't want to ask someone to marry you on the first date, right? You want to start off slow. So same thing, you can reach out to an alum who you think may be in the field or industry or connected to the people that you're interested in knowing, and ask for an informational interview. Get in front of them, be respectful of their time, and then also think about who are your warm connects. So who do you know in your friends and family group that might know someone? So sometimes I do this in class. I'll just take any profession like entertainment, and then I'll say, all right, who knows someone in entertainment? And it's really fascinating because always there is someone who can help someone, and it's being willing to do that for each other. Okay, so we reflect, we do some research. Well, the third thing is to actually go ahead and reach out. And you know what? I feel like I sound like the Nike commercial, just do it. It's scary. It's really scary to reach out. And sometimes we feel like, well, we're not worthy. And I find that coming from my undergrads up to the senior executives I work with. Or we feel like people are really busy. Why do they want to talk to me, right? And so what I highly recommend is that you ask yourself, how can I be reciprocal in this relationship? I'm really into alliteration tonight with all these R's. So you ask yourself, what is it that I offer to this person? Because every single one of you has something great to offer. It might be your energy, it might be your enthusiasm, it might be your ideas, it might be your connections. But a really great thing to do when you reach out is, first of all, muster your courage. So I talk about this idea of having a courage ritual. It could be a power pose, it could be a song, it could be a poem, it could be a quote. Whatever your thing is that gets you pumped up, do that. And if you don't have a thing, I've got a whole bunch of blogs that I've written about that my students have shared their courage rituals. So reach out and tell them that you want to help them too. So one of the best proteges that ever reached out to me said, I want to talk to you for 15 minutes. I want to learn these 2 things, and I want to know how can I help you. And I'll never forget that, and my door is always open to him. And then the last thing to do is to reflect once again and ask yourself, how can I express appreciation? So often people come over, or like an informational interview, and then they kind of disappear. So a really great thing to do is go back, give them a LinkedIn endorsement, express that appreciation. So that's the 3-minute spiel, and I guess I can really do questions. Yes.
That was great. Thank you so much. So next will be Mr. Rachel. How are you this evening?
Wonderful, thank you.
Wonderful. I love the haircut. Working it. So Rachel, as a former Google exec and founder of an AI company, you have been in the trenches in a male-dominated area in Silicon Valley. Can you please describe your overall experience and what you hope to see done differently here in Silicon Beach?
I've been in tech for about 20 years, so I've seen a lot, and I've also been the co-founder or early team startup for 4 startups, 5 if you include the founding team of Google.org. And I've seen a lot of differences. One key difference in raising capital with co-founders who are men versus women is it's about 10 times harder. We had an all-female founding team with Fem Inc., and it easily took me, I would say probably a year longer than it needed to raise my Series A. And in my prior startups, when I did not have all women, it was a lot easier, and it wasn't just the climate. I raised for both LA and Silicon Valley, and I would say that my last company, which I'm currently the CEO of, a holding company, Fem Inc., it was both a startup and my personal sandbox. That's why it's a holding company, so I can do whatever I want. But it was also an experiment in leadership. So we were an all-female team. We had one of my co-founders had been a friend of mine for 16 years. She's a neuroscientist, academic researcher, brilliant mind. Another was an early Google search engineer. She was my CTO. And we were experimenting with a completely different way to lead. And it was the most positive experience I've ever had as a leader. I will tell you that it changed the dynamics completely from the top down. And when you have a culture where fundamentally every single person is respected, where there are no egos, where you have open communication, where you have high degrees of trust, in some ways it's an uncanny ability to read each other's minds, because you get to a place where there's so much transparency, so much openness and caring for each other that you don't get into fights, you don't get into arguments, you work things out early on, and it was just one of the most positive experiences I've ever had. And so for those of you, the trade-offs, it will be harder to raise, it still is. When I started my career, we were getting around 7% of funding. Now women, what is it, 2.4? So it's not going in the right direction. And systemically, women are blocked from a lot of different resources. I think WeWork, by the way, is doing great things to unlock that. We used WeWork in our early days. A lot of other companies out there which are taking down some of those barriers to starting a company. But for me, it was understanding that there isn't one leadership model. And that if you're going to start a company, culture is incredibly important. And the DNA that you create at the very beginning is what will very much remain as you scale. And so getting that right early on is super important. I also think that some of the differences, I do see a lot more diversity down here than you see up there today. You know, the bro culture is the thing, and when I was in, it wasn't always like that, by the way. And when I started my career, it was actually very hospitable for women around, this is in the mid-90s. I know, I'm aging myself now. But it was actually, you know, it was a meritocracy because there was this enormous pool of opportunities. So many people were needed to create the internet. And so it was less about how you looked, you know, your exact background. It was get in there, do the job, prove yourself, work hard, and then work your way up. And then that really changed. And you see that in a lot of occupations. It's, you know, occupational segregation and discrimination, where in certain fields, as it becomes more mature or more appealing or more glamorous or pays well, it tends to become a little bit more rigid, sometimes more hierarchical. And in tech, I would say that there was a trend that became much more sharp elbows, and you know, you don't look the way an engineer is supposed to look, you don't act, you don't play the games we play. And I saw that at Google, in fact, it completely changed their recruiting model because of the interview process and how hostile it had become to women. So I think that the industry is aware, which is wonderful. You know, the fact that there are diversity reports, the fact that companies are being held accountable, and that the majority of women do care whether or not a company has had a sexual harassment scandal and or has guidelines in place to prevent it. Those things actually matter when you're thinking about recruiting top talent. So hold employers accountable, hold your company that you start accountable, and keep in mind that with this awareness, there's then also a responsibility to act. And I think that we now have some models of how to do that. I think what Salesforce did in righting the wrong around pay equity was a really big step forward. It didn't cost them very much, by the way. What was it, a $4 million hit to the bottom line to pay everyone fairly? That's not a big deal in the scheme of things. So there are things that companies can do to try and even that balance, which may sound painful, but may not be. And perception is often our enemy here. It's usually much easier to implement changes than it is to think about implementing those changes. And so I think down here we have an opportunity to create anew, to create fresh models.
I'm so pumped up right now. Like, I want to go out and create something. Let's start a company with me. Amanda! Alrighty, thank you so much, Rachel. Next up, Cam. How are you this evening?
I'm doing amazing.
Doing amazing, looking amazing. So Cam, you are known in the community as the Godmother of Silicon Beach. As you started Co-Loft, the first co-working space in Los Angeles for tech startups and entrepreneurs in 2010, it was home to over 1,800 alumni, including Uber LA, Instacart, and Fullscreen. It was a successful space that you co-founded with your former husbands. When you filed for divorce, you were fired from your company. Let's all let that sink in. Cam, I know this is not easy for you, but I think this chapter in your life is important for others to hear. Can you please tell us how you were able to rebuild your life after losing your identity?
Yeah, totally. Thank you for the real question.
Sorry.
But I keep it real, so it's all good.
Let's go.
No, and just to add to that, like, it's so easy for me to talk about this, you guys, because it turned out to be the biggest blessing of my life. And so I want to really just preface all of it with that. Like, there is nothing going on inside me like, oh my God, I have to share my story. No, it's all good. And it's actually a story I enjoy sharing because it helps people, it inspires people, and it helps people really align with their power. So, yeah. Well, yeah, where to begin on that? I'm just trying to think where I want to start on that. So, yeah, CoLoft was the first co-working space in LA. It was highly successful. It was my second company. My first company was a total failure. The reason I want to talk about that a little bit is because it's really important to be okay with failure. And positioning failure as growth in your mind as opposed to something scary. Human beings have the ability to attach meaning to things. And the meaning that we attach to failure is that it's really bad and really embarrassing, and people are we're going to be seen, and it's vulnerable, and it's all of these things. But in fact, it's just learning. It's just learning. It's just growth, and you have to fail. So position failure as growth in your mind, and the fear of it subsides. So the first company I had was a total failure. 2 years, $200,000 of our own money, and 3 customers. Yeah, brutal. Okay. So that happened. And it happened during the economic crisis, so I couldn't find a job. And it was while I was getting my MBA here. Hey, proud alum. It inspired the idea for the co-working space. So one of the major reasons why the first company failed was a lack of community and lack of resources, and we just didn't know what the fuck we were doing. I'm sorry, I swear openly. I hope I don't offend anybody in the process. Yeah. So we had no idea what we were doing, and CoLoft was this concept born in our mind, like, let's create this space, an AA for entrepreneurs, so to say. We're kind of like a different breed. We need our own little place. And it was beautiful, and it became this incredible breeding ground. Like she said, we had the early Tinder team, we had Instacart, we had ZipRecruiter. We had so many names that you guys know as like home, like, what is that word? Like home names or whatever? Household, thank you. Household names. Home names. You know what I mean. And it was a magical space, and it was a part of my life for 4 years. And I really identified with it. I allowed it to really become a part of who I am. I was CoLoft Cam. So the moment I filed for divorce, and 2 weeks later, I get an email saying you've been fired from your own company. Yeah, I know. That was my reaction. I was like, what the fuck? You can do that? How is that even like that? Is that okay? I didn't know that my name wasn't on my own company because I trusted my partner. So I want you guys to be really, 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 really adamant about everything in writing, okay? That was the biggest takeaway from that one. But yeah, that moment, what happened was I felt like I had no identity. I was that guy's wife for 12 years, and then I was CoLoft Cam. And overnight, I'm a single mom. I have twin boys now, they're 6 years old. At that time, they were barely 1.5. And I just felt lost, naked in the universe. Who am I? What am I here for? What am I supposed? I don't even know what I'm supposed to do right now. I felt completely depleted and just shut down. And I went into a deep depression at that time, 100%. I'm not gonna hide that. It was a very difficult time for me. And what helped me get through it was the woman who is now my business partner, which is where the whole theme of the power of mentorship kind of comes into this. She, instead of a mentor, she was actually my coach. And she's now my business partner. We both coach together. And she saw something in me at that period of time that I just didn't see within myself. And she told me, this is all happening for you to learn. This is all happening for you to find who you truly are, to find your own power, to not be attached to these external things that you claim are actually a part of your identity. This is all happening for you to find out the truth of who you are, for you to find out that you are the one who creates your own power. You are the one who creates your own identity. Don't let things define you, you define them. And that was such a huge wake-up call for me in that moment. And not to say the depression went away, that shit lasted for a minute, okay? But she was there with me, and basically, although she didn't live here, she was like holding my hand. She would call me every day. Cam, how are you today? I need you to stay strong. I need you to just push yourself through this. You can do this. You can do this. My divorce ended up taking 2 years, which by itself was just a depleting process. During that time, I was just trying to be a mom and trying to exist, to be honest. And Jasmine's working with me, which was phenomenal. And once the divorce was over was when I began rebuilding me, and I called it Project Cam. So I started doing a lot of different seminars, a lot of transformational seminars. I was working with Jasmine, and separate from that, I hired a separate coach to help me really find myself and to get some tools that I needed to be able to get myself out of this thing. I was literally in the fetal position in my bed. I didn't want to move. I didn't want to do anything. And so I committed myself to myself. I told myself I am worthy, and I am going to get myself out of this. Everything in life is temporary. Even the worst feelings in the world are temporary. And I was really committed to helping myself get out of it. I had 2 children depending on me. And I just wanted to give myself the life that I knew I truly deserved. So I did overtime in regard to personal development. I highly encourage each and every single one of you to explore that world. Mentorship is powerful, and coaching is extremely powerful. To help you really, really bring out that true power and true essence that each of you have within you, to dissolve those layers of fear, to dissolve the layers of ego. And when I say ego, I don't mean the typical ego that we're talking about, like Donald Trump status. I'm talking about like anything that separates you from your authentic self and who you truly are. Dissolving those layers, fears and doubts, they all fall under the level of the world of ego. And really dissolving those and allowing your true self to come out. And that's the work that I did. And I literally, in a 9-month period, went from being in the fetal position. 9 months later, I'm working with the State Department. I'm in Kuwait as an expert speaker, working with the women in the Middle East, helping them build entrepreneurial projects, helping them with their entrepreneurial ecosystem. And that was the moment where I realized, holy shit, this is who I am. This is the powerful woman that I have been hiding my entire life. It's each and every single one of your responsibilities to really commit to yourself to find out who you truly are. You are born to be that person, and then you go through experiences in life that end up resulting in a voice in your mind that lies to you. It's your job to dissolve that voice and make it a voice that loves you, that empowers you, that helps you see the truth of who you are. That's what I did. That was the moment of realization where I realized I wanted to be a coach, and I wanted to help people find this voice within them and find their power, and I've been doing that ever since now with COACCEL. It's been almost 3 years. I've never been happier in my entire existence of life. It's been such an incredible journey, and like I said, I look back at that now and I say, oh my God, it turned out to be the biggest blessing of my life because it helped me realize who I truly am. And I will never take it back, as difficult as it might have been.
Thank you, Cam. Well said. I think that resonates with a lot of people in this room, the idea that, learn from failure, how to be your motivator. So thank you for that, and thank you for being so personal and open. And finally, let's see, Miss Lara. Hi Lara, how are you tonight?
Great, how are you?
I'm doing well, thanks so much for being here. So, Lara, you're in a high-powered leadership role at Snap Inc. as Chief Accounting Officer. It is our understanding that you are a huge proponent of women mentoring other women within the organization. How do you encourage and promote mentorship with your company?
I really thought about this one a lot because there's a lot of different layers to mentoring. And I received a quote recently that really stuck with me, and that's empowered women empower women.
I saw that.
I love it. And I really, when I got into the C-suite, even prior to that, but particularly when I got into the C-suite, when you open a door, it's critically important that you keep that door open for other people. And so I felt, in addition to my 4 job responsibilities, I really wanted to take it upon myself to figure out how can I help other people get into this room. And so a couple of different aspects to how I approached that, and was also supported by some amazing people at the company. One, we didn't have an executive sponsor for our female diversity group. And so I became the executive sponsor for that group and really got to spend a lot of time with those women, hearing their perspective about what are the things and the barriers to what they're trying to achieve professionally. In addition to that, I partnered with the other female VPs in the organization to do our inaugural Women's Summit to talk about, well, as leaders, what is our job to help bring up other future leaders. And the thing that came out of both of those dialogues was mentoring. And so I thought it was really interesting. There was a gap that existed because in the conversations that I had with all these different women, we found that many men seem to find these organic mentoring relationships. Yet so many women I spoke to actually told me they'd never had a mentor. And it just shocked me. And so I think that's where we did the mentoring program that you mentioned in the beginning is, well, if it's difficult for them to find these pairings, let's create a structure in the organization where we actually proactively pair people. And what's interesting, we talk about women mentoring women, but it was equally as important for men to mentor women. So we enlisted male leaders across the organization as well as female leaders and paired them up with women who were looking for a mentoring relationship. And as you mentioned, 300 women wanted to sign up for the program, and we've got them matched, and we're a couple months in and really excited for how that looks. But I think something that Cam mentioned really resonated with me that we also saw in there is really encouraging people. It's great that we've created a program, but there's not always going to be a program. And it's each of our individual responsibilities to take care of our own future. And so be very cognizant in your lives to ask for a one-on-one with somebody. And it doesn't take much just to say, hey, do you have time to chat? You want to walk and grab a coffee? Whatever it is, you will find that people, men and women, tend to be very generous with their time. And the couple people that aren't, oh well, there's 5 more who are willing to be generous with their time. And I find those really organic relationships come from that willingness to just have a conversation. And then in the future, after you've developed in your career, remember to be generous with your time, because there's going to be people coming up after you who need your help. And when they say, hey, you have a minute, try very, very hard to not be too busy for that time, because you have no idea how big that impact could be on somebody. So I think from that standpoint, from a company aspect, we certainly try to be intentional about figuring out the forums for people to share what are the things that will be most impactful to them and create resources to help nurture and provide those tools. But then also individually, I'm a naturally pretty social curious person, but I think that translates into, I think it's important that I'm generous with my time, and whether it's young men coming up and the more we can help them as well, be empowered men who will then in the future empower more women. It's just a great giving model that I highly value.
Awesome, thank you so much, Lara. I'm going to bring it back to Rachel. So when we spoke, you mentioned the importance of mentorship and sponsorship. Can you please elaborate on what it means to be a sponsor versus a mentor?
And I'd also like to break down mentoring as well.
Absolutely.
So in my life, I've benefited from having wonderful mentors, men and women, who were above me in terms of their career path and that I aspired to learn from. But there's also peer mentoring. And when I was at Stanford Business School, I was president of Women in Management, and we managed a program called Women in Management, and we had these groups of between 9 and 12 women who we would pair up into a circle, and they would meet every week. My WIM group still meets every month. This is 12 years later. So these are very powerful networks that you grow with. And if you can create your own peer mentoring networks, These are just people in your own circle. These do not have to be executives who you aspire to be like. But guess what? Flash forward 10 years and you're that executive. And now you've grown up with all these other women who are also really impressive. And it's really helpful because you get to these really critical junctures in your life. Maybe you're trying to make a decision about a promotion that you're fighting for, or a reload, or whatever it might be. Having a peer group who knows you, who care about you, and who understand the complexities of your life, your responsibilities and everything else, are invaluable. We actually set up these groups now down here in LA. And so we have our WIM groups, and then the GSB decided to create GSB circles because of this model. So this is all over Stanford now. And this is becoming a default model to help women with the networking gap, or the mentoring gap. Sponsorship. So you might think you have great relationships with people at work, and then behind closed doors, they make decisions about who gets promoted, right? If you don't have a sponsor in that room behind those closed doors, you're not going to get the promotion. And I think too many women fall into the trap of, I'm going to work hard, I'm going to do a great job, I'm going to put my head down, I'm going to get it done, and then never bother to work the politics of corporate America. And I'm specifically referring to large corporations, but this happens in startups too. If you are not aware of the political environment and you're not forging those critical alliances, you won't have a sponsor when it comes down to it. And that's what you need. More women need sponsors. There's a lot of guys who are sort of the protege, and they get groomed, and they're patted on the back, and they're like, you're gonna be the next X. That doesn't happen very often for women. And that kind of sponsorship is absolutely key to attaining that C-level suite. So you need the people who've got your back behind the closed door in the corporate boardroom, who are willing to say, no, she's the one who should be VP. Because that's what it's going to come down to at the end of the day. So that's the difference.
Perfect, thank you so much. Alrighty, and bring it back to Lara. So recently the California Diversity Council announced that as one of the top 50 most powerful women, announced you as one of the top 50 most powerful women in technology. Congratulations! In the audience, we have students, we have entrepreneurs, community leaders, and many amazing people who are movers and shakers. How can they foster diversity and inclusion as they begin their journey as an entrepreneur?
I'm really passionate about the impact that having diverse perspectives have. And if any of you think about anytime you tried to solve a problem, if you A, did it by yourself, or you did it with a bunch of people who all had the exact same idea that you did, the problem took a heck of a lot longer to be solved, and you probably stumbled along the way unnecessarily. And so if I think you just go to the core of what is the value of different perspectives, it is that they give you the opportunity to come up with ideas you may not have been able to come up with on your own. They warn you about unintended consequences that you may not have thought of because your perspective is from one view. And it really helps to fuel innovation. It helps to avoid unnecessary mistakes, although I totally agree that failure is a great learning moment, and we should not be afraid of that. And the minute you stop and recognize the value that diversity brings to anything that you were trying to solve, whether it's a problem, innovation, etc., then you need to step back and think, okay, how do I get those perspectives in the room? And there's two lenses that I focus on personally, and one is understanding what are the needs of the various diverse populations, and creating a forum for them to be able to have a voice, to be able to articulate what the needs are, and more importantly, what the barriers are, I think helps to surface that dialogue. But to me, that really needs to be coupled with allyship. Because to have people who are already dealing with problems that have probably been perpetuating for years upon years upon years, and not have the people listening who could potentially help to break down those barriers, it just doesn't give it the same fuel that it can have. And so one of the things that I'm really passionate about is figuring out how to broaden awareness. And that is by listening. Half the time, it's not that you need to go into somebody else's space and tell them what they need. shut up and listen to what they need. I mean, it's one of the biggest things that I'm finding is just hear what it is. Then the other side of it that is, I think, a big problem, especially one of the things that, as we talked about before in the tech space, is dealing with unconscious bias. And there is a lot of attention that is put on training people about unconscious bias, but there's a dimension to it that I think we really need to index on. It's one thing to tell people this is what unconscious bias looks like. And by the way, you may have unconscious bias. But there's a different ingredient, that is, what do you do when you're in a room when somebody is being biased against? What is the action you should take to help them, to stand up for them in the most appropriate way? So I'm really keen to help, whether this is something that we're doing within our own company, but that people should think about as they're going out and thinking about starting their own companies, is remember to look out for that person who might be a little bit different in the room, whose voice might be suppressed, where you can be their ally. And the value you would get from that is literally limitless.
Awesome, perfect. So, unfortunately, we're going to have to wrap up this panel discussion. Thank you for those final thoughts. As you can see, these women come from different backgrounds and professions, but they have many things in common. They believe in the power of mentorship, and they believe in the strength of women. I'd like to open it up if any of you have any questions at the moment for any of our panelists this evening. And if not, let's give a big round of